This is a full book summary of Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace. Let us get to start with. I'm recording all the fun fact, all these video sets. I record them straight in a row. So this is why I'm wearing the same stuff right in every video. Let's get to start with. Now, Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace. This is a full book summary. We start off with Anna Paryona, or however you pronounce that Russian name. I'm just gonna call her Anna. Anna hosting this party where all the aristocrats are all there. All the Russian aristocrats are talking about Napoleon's conquest and stuff, and then trying to go ahead and intermingle with others and lots of other stuff. Aristocrats go ahead, talk about the tensions among the peace and how Napoleon might go ahead and invade their own country, but then they all decide to go ahead and change the topic towards all the things that the aristocrats seem to always care about. XXX, money, and well, love. So there we go. This is also the part that we get introduced towards our boy Pierre and all the others like Natasha and Romanov. Whenever I think of the name Natasha, I always think of Black Widow. So sorry if I said Romanov. It's actually Rostova. I'm a Marvel fan. Get used to it. Okay, so we have Nastalia, Countess Nastalia Rostova's daughter, Natasha Rostova, and we also have Pierre Bezukhov, and everyone else. We have literally a lot of characters. Like, even when I'm trying to draw a character tree of all this, even on one page, it's a little too much because all of it is a bunch of connections. Here, let me show you. Like, seriously, I know, like, on the screen recording it's gonna get mirrored, so you're probably gonna have to backwards this yourself in your imagination, but seriously, this is my family tree of War and Peace. Use your imagination to flip it backwards and all, but in my opinion, this was one of the most complicated book ever to read. And if you ever see the length of this book itself, you can see why. It's even longer than Don Quixote. It's way longer than Don Quixote. It's like double its pages. So this is probably the biggest and sickest book that you'll ever read and find in your life. Try to find me a sicker and bigger book that is just one book. No, Lord of the Rings doesn't count. It's 3 books. Actually, Lord of the Rings kind of does count, does it? Other than Lord of the Rings, what else is longer than War and Peace? Find me a book from the 19th century that is this sick. 360 pages long. What do you expect? What other book do you have? Other than my complaints about this book, I'll save that for a review. I will go ahead and tell you more about the story. Anyways, after that part, we finally get to talk about the aristocrats. We finally get to find out all our main characters in childhood or infant forms. In the sense of that they're still children at this point. Yes, I draw art really terribly when I draw fast. So this is all the kids, and they go ahead and they work together, and then we have our Natasha going ahead and wooing everyone and charming everyone with her great charisma, even though she's speaking nonsense about her infant doll. Yes, if you can call a doll an infant. And other stuff. Fast forward several years. I'm not gonna go to the specifics here. This is for the review. The Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace. We finally have the war coming along. At least in the sense of like the war cries are being cried out in the horizons. In the sense of war, we have to go ahead and talk and discuss about the world status. Now, people tend to like to say that this is a historical romance in the backdrop of the wars of 1812, not the American one, the Napoleonic one, in France and technically Russia too. And yes, you would be correct, but it's way much more than that. There's a bunch of philosophical layers underneath all that, and there's a bunch of other things that we can literally talk about too. But unfortunately, that is not what we're here for today, so I will not be going into those specifics. But, and there's always a but, we finally get the war. And so when the war finally comes around, Russia's losing terribly, of course. Now, historians, according to Tolstoy, like to think that the Russians had this strategy of where they were luring the French into the middle of their heartland so that they could go ahead and trap them. So that the historians apparently imagined their strategy to be like this. Okay, you're in our homeland, and now I click this bigger like the button, and boom, bang, bing, bang, boom, bang, bing, bing, you're trapped in here forever, and now we're going to execute you with gas stuff. When in fact their actual strategy was Oh no, the French are coming. We gotta go ahead and push them back. Fight them, fight them, fight them. Brute force them out of our lands, out of our holy motherlands. Their plan was to essentially just rider kick them, or flying roundhouse kick them out of the Russian borders. Now, on the French side, it was imagined everyone, the historians on the French side, like to go ahead and think that Napoleon had used his big brain moment and to go ahead and calculate everything and every possible motion and battle that could be happening at that moment, and then he chose the wisest version to go ahead and invade into the middle of Russia with a very good strategy, and then did this little miscalculation in the sense that he forgot it was winter. This is also partially untrue because in the sense that he perfectly knew that Russia winter was, and his advisors were literally advising him not to invade Russia in the middle of winter because, well, that's a mistake. History has shown you that anyone who tries to invade Russia in the middle of winter will die, unless you're the Mongols. And in the sense that Napoleon was actually going ahead and charging into the middle, hoping that he could destroy the Russians before anyone else could interfere with his grand conquest of plans, because he knew that if he defeated Russia then he knew he could defeat Britain if he can somehow just cross the English Channel and then turn it into the French Channel. That was his wet dream, I suppose. But other than all these historical jokes that might actually get me canceled from YouTube and get unfriended by my friends, the French were in Russia, no exceptions, and now the Russians had to deal with them. So we had these battles and the Moscow being pillaged and burned, and then we had this one little place called Borodino, which could have went ahead and faced the entirety of what this war could become. So the French and the Russians all gathered at the Battle of Borodino and waited for what could happen. And so if you look at the numbers, if you compare the numbers, the French actually had twice as many people as the Russians did, but they somehow lost. What happened? According to Tolstoy, he said that there was a great spiritual Russian spirit that went ahead and gave them a boost of times infinity. And as you can see, which is greater, infinity or 2? This is not a Z. This is a 2. You can immediately see that the golden infinity outshines pretty much everything in its path, including itself. And at that decisive moment, that's when Mother Russia's spiritual army strikes back and punches Napoleon in the face a little bit. Where now that he's punched, he has to literally go ahead and get his army out of Russia and somehow get them all back alive. That's impossible. By the time he himself is able to go ahead and escape the Russian border, he has less than 1%. He has less than 1% of his army remaining. At least according to Tolstoy. The numbers are probably actually a bit more or less than that, but hey. Does it really matter? Now, what else do we have to talk about? Not much, in all honesty, with you guys. Natasha herself goes ahead and becomes what? Not much else, to be honest. Natasha himself and Pierre, they're living their lives. They're having a great aristocratic lifestyle. Napoleon and Tsar Alexander have their confrontation. Alexander wins, obviously. I'm talking about the battle between France and Russia, by the way. And then by the time that the Russians actually somehow win the Napoleonic Wars, and Britain wins the Napoleonic Wars with them, and they liberate all the countries that are conquered by the Napoleonic France, then they start to go ahead and realize that, hey, this was one of the most awesome times in history and that we need to go ahead and talk to someone about it. And then we also find out about the New World Order, where where all the Russian aristocracy have their lives completely flipped around, in the sense of all their wealth, it's just not working. And trying to stay and live with their aristocratic lives because they were always used to this from the moment of their childhood, kind of makes you think how incompetent they are to become part of the rulers of Russia. But we get a happy ending. The survivors are surviving. They're slowly rebuilding their lives. And later soon, they will probably go ahead and realize that this war kind of did change something for the better in their lives. That they will become one of the greater nations in the sense of a world of unity and despair. So that's about it. That's all I can say about the full book summary of Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace. I really hope you guys enjoyed this episode, Han-Chan. And so until next time, Shihana Peace. Bye-bye. This was a summary of Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace.